distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, and civil society representatives. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all guests and participants. Let me warmly welcome you to this official launch of the United Nations System-Wide Dashboard on Gender Parity. We are excited to present this joint initiative by United Nations Development Programme and UN Women. This dashboard aims to strengthen system-wide monitoring and data collection in support of the Secretary-General's system-wide strategy on gender parity. My name is Katja Berman. I'm Senior Advisor and the focal point for women in the UN system at UN Women, and it's my great pleasure to serve as your facilitator for this event. Dear members of the audience, we are thrilled to see so many of you joining us today from all over the world. And indeed, we have a whole hour of exciting program ahead of us. This official launch will soon start with the opening remarks by UN Women's Executive Director Sima Bahous and UNDP's Administrator Achim Steiner, followed by a presentation of the UN System-Wide Dashboard on Gender Parity. After that, we will hear a video message from President of the United Nations General Assembly, His Excellency Abdulla Shahid. Following that, we are privileged to welcome remarks by Her Excellency, Permanent Representative of Rwanda to the United Nations, Ms. Valentine Rugwabiza, as well as by Deputy Special Representatives for Protection and Operations in the UN Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Mr. Kassim Dian. Moreover, we will have a pleasure to hear from Ms. Yasmin Hassan, who is Global Executive Director from Equality Now. Then we will conclude with His Excellency Ambassador for Economic, Social and United Nations Management Affairs, Mr. Tetsuya Kimura from the Permanent Mission of Japan to the United Nations and Vice President of UN Women's Executive Board. Please note that this event will be recorded and will be shared on public platforms. Let me also thank the sign language interpreters for their work to make this event inclusive and accessible. Now, without further ado, let me hand over to UN Women's Executive Director, Sima Bahous. Over to you, Executive Director.
Thank you, Katja. And good morning to you all. I am really delighted that you all have joined us, and I extend a warm welcome to everyone. Distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, dear civil society representatives, I am pleased to officially launch the UN System-Wide Dashboard on Gender Parity together with my colleague, Mr. Achim Steiner, Administrator of the United Nations Development Programme. This is an exciting morning for us. I am very proud that this dashboard is the first of its kind to consolidate, monitor, and track gender parity progress in the whole UN system in a timely manner. It presents data on the representation of women and men across various dimensions, including grade levels, entities, staff categories, and duty stations. This serves not only the interests of the UN entities, but also responds to the requests of member states to have more updated data on parity available to them. It will enable all of us to follow progress and make necessary adjustments along the way. This is essential for the UN to achieve and maintain gender parity. We sincerely hope that the dashboard, with its up-to-date and publicly available data, will be a highly utilized tool for leadership and hiring managers to ensure that gender parity is a critical consideration at all stages of the recruitment processes. We know that a lack of representation of women, be it in decision-making, in peacekeeping, or agenda setting discussions, has significant repercussions. We need equal representation of women at all tables, and that includes within the United Nations. The goal of 50-50 representation within the UN system was set nearly 30 years ago through the Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action. It was in 1995. Today, the overall representation of women in the UN system stands at approximately 45%. We still need to get this up to 50% and to keep it at 50%. We also need to address the fact that women's representation decreases progressively at the mid and senior management levels. For example, at the director level, women's representation remains at 38% across the United Nations. Moreover, and according to our research, the COVID-19 pandemic has negatively affected progress towards parity and the well-being of women personnel, especially those with care responsibilities. This is why we need to closely and constantly monitor and report on the numbers. We know that numbers can sometimes change rapidly, and we need to understand why. UN Women will continue to monitor and report on the representation of women in the UN system as per our mandate. We will also continue to illustrate challenges and good practice examples and present concrete recommendations for the United Nations system on how to reach parity. The network of over 400 UN gender focal points also plays a vital role in enhancing gender parity, and I wish to recognize their valuable work and their valuable contributions. We at UN Women continue to lead and coordinate this crucial network of what we call agents of change. Distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, the UN system-wide dashboard on gender parity is a product of a recommended action by the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in his system-wide strategy on gender parity, with the aim to reach gender parity by 2028, and a showcase of the One UN initiative. UN Women and UNDP, as we heard earlier from Katya, work jointly to develop the dashboard by bringing together our expertise, knowledge, and resources to improve monitoring and to increase transparency. We are pleased to have UNDP as our steadfast partner in this joint initiative, and let me therefore extend my gratitude to you, dear Achim, and to your colleagues at UNDP for excellent collaboration, as always. Let me also thank the nearly 40 UN entities that have participated in our first developing phase of the dashboard. The data will be updated quarterly, and we will also explore possibilities for automated population of data in the future. In closing, let me say that we are optimistic that this dashboard will help us to achieve parity. Through it, we hope that we can jointly expedite our efforts to reach gender parity within the UN and to improve the effectiveness and credibility of the United Nations as a whole. I also count on you, dear member states and dear civil society partners, to support us and to hold us accountable in our efforts. Only by working together, we can achieve the goals of gender parity and create enabling, equal, and inclusive working environments for all. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Executive Director. As you said, it is important to constantly monitor and report on the numbers, and this dashboard will indeed provide transparency related to the representation of women and men and the progress made towards achieving parity. Next, it is my privilege to welcome the Administrator of United Nations Development Programme and the co-host of this event, Mr. Achim Steiner. Over to you, Administrator.
Katja, thank you so much for both hosting us this morning and for your role and work also as focal point for women in the UN system, in addition to being the senior advisor with UN Women. Dear Seema, this is our first joint event in your new capacity, so I also want to extend a very warm welcome to you. And I want to begin by saying what a privilege it is to do this joint event with UN Women. As you by now know, and many of our member states also, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the UNDP and UN Women partnership is actually one that brings us together literally every day in over 100 countries. And our engagement includes a wide range of areas, including support to legal and policy reforms to advance gender equality, women's political participation, and economic empowerment. So today, we are launching the latest results of our close partnership on behalf of the UN family, and it is the launch of the joint UN system-wide dashboard on gender parity that you already spoke to, Seema, and it is really a moment that I think we can be a little bit proud of, because it is the first of its kind to monitor progress made on gender parity within the UN system. The dashboard collects and collates data from nearly 40 agencies. The representation of women and men can be searched by grade, staff categories, duty stations, and age group. UN member states, civil society representatives, and other partners can also follow the dashboard's gender parity index charts. They show the number of men or women needed for the UN to achieve gender parity as part of the UN Secretary General's system-wide strategy on gender parity. The most updated data on parity will be available and accessible every 4 months. And highlighting gaps and opportunities, the dashboard will be a vital tool to drive forward gender equality across the UN system on gender equality. And I also want to mention that this is another good example of how agencies, funds, and programs join in partnerships to develop one UN platforms and solutions, in this instance curated by UN Women and UNDP, but on behalf of the whole system. And I think also a good signal of how we can live up to the Secretary General's commitment on gender equality and parity while reporting in a very effective manner. As part of our next generation UNDP approach, we have been pioneering a range of initiatives to make better use of data to inform our programming, generating better results for the communities that we serve, especially women and girls and marginalized groups. That includes examples such as our Data Futures platform, which pulls together data from the UN system, non-profit partners, academia, development partners, and countries around the world. Interactive tools provide unique opportunities for this kind of data analysis and insights. And as part of that platform, the COVID-19 Global Gender Response Tracker by UN Women and UNDP, launched earlier this year, is also helping governments to identify and address gaps in their response to the pandemic, from ways to address gender-based violence to how we redistribute unpaid care work. We are therefore grateful to the Secretary General for his recognition of our collective expertise in this area as data-led organizations as we launch this new UN system-wide dashboard on gender parity. Indeed, gender equality is central to UNDP's work, being one of the 6 signature solutions in our recently adopted new strategic plan, as well as a cross-cutting theme in all of UNDP's programmatic work, which is why we complement and cooperate so closely with UN Women in terms of its mandate and our collective capacities to roll out support at country level. In the year 2020, UNDP maintained, and I'm very proud of that, a 50-50 gender balance and embraced a range of initiatives to ensure a gender equitable environment for all of its personnel. And indeed, at the 3 senior tiers of management in the organization, we have achieved 50-50 gender parity. This year, UNDP was also awarded the EDGE Move Certificate, one of the leading independent gender equality certification programs in the world. And furthermore, UNDP Gender Equality Seals for country offices, a UNDP flagship program on gender equality, is continuously improving the awareness and also the commitment of our staff in each team and in each country on gender parity and women's decision-making at all levels in our country offices. We are now in the midst of developing the next UN gender equality strategy for 22 to 25, and I think it will fit very well with the intent also of this dashboard. Dear SEMA, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, to build forward better from the COVID-19 crisis and to get the global goals firmly on track, back on track perhaps in some instances, we cannot simply return to the world we had before. We must move forward, we must do things differently. That means breaking down the barriers that hold women and girls back, including inside our UN family and system, something that hopefully this dashboard will help us to do. It's time to fully harness the power of women's leadership inside the United Nations family as much as we support it in the countries we serve, and to realize generation equality and build that more inclusive and sustainable future. Thank you once again, and congratulations also to all our staff and colleagues in the agencies, funds and programs, the Secretariat, who have made this kind of collaboration possible, and I think today we can say successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Administrator Steiner. As you said, we must do things differently when recovering from the COVID-19 crisis and break the barriers that hold women back, such as lack of updated data. And thank you again for UNDP's efforts for making sure that this is not the case within the United Nations and that we now have updated data available. Excellencies, dear members of the audience, it is time for us to explore the dashboard. Let me welcome Project Manager Mr. Siddharth Pawar from UNDP, who will provide us with a short journey through the contents of the dashboard. Over to you, please.
Thank you, Katia, for the warm introduction. It's my great pleasure to give you a demonstration of the UN system-wide dashboard on gender parity. I'll go ahead now and share my screen. So the first page, what you see is our landing slide page. Now you see what you see on the landing slide page on the dashboard. It gives you a brief explanation about how it was developed and what kind of data it presents. So we're going to get started by clicking this Get Started button. When you click this Get Started button, you come on the information page. On this page, it explains the methodology, the scope, and details about how the data was collected and calculated. We have also provided a hyperlink here to the Secretariat dashboard, which covers the UN Secretariat data. Nearly 40 entities have participated. This is one of the greatest features of the dashboard. If you click on the blue button, you would see the logos of all the participating agencies. Nearly 40 agencies have participated. And at this point, I would also like to thank all the data specialists who have been proactive in entering their data in the system. I'm going to the next page now, which is the navigation page. Now, on this page, what you see is 6 tabs, which present data in a different format. So we have the system-wide gender parity overview. We have the representation of women and men by ratio and entity, map on representation of women and men by duty station, representation of women and men by duty station and further details, representation of women and men by age group, and finally a page which shows the latest effective data of the page of the data entry. I'll get started with the first one, which is the system-wide gender parity overview. Now, what you see over here is the men are represented in yellow and women are represented in blue. On the top left corner, you see the overall representation of women and men by ratio. This is inclusive of all the 40 participating agencies. As you can see from the pie chart, we have 45.8% representation of women and 54.2% representation of men. On the bottom left, what we have given is the representation of women and men by staff categories. In the UN system, we have different staff categories. We have IP staff, which is our international professional staff. We have the local international staff, which is called as national officers. And then we have the general service category. As you can see from this bottom left chart, we have 23,217 men and 20,799 women working on the IP level. The middle chart, which is in the middle of the page, shows the data by grades. In the UN, we have different staff grades, and the chart goes from the most senior most grade, which is our USG, which stands for Under Secretary General. Then we have the directors, then we have the professional grades, the national officer grades, and the general service grade. The number on the grade denotes the seniority. So for example, a P5 is more senior than a P2. So if you look at this chart, you would see that on a P5, you have 59.1% men representation as compared to 42.2% men representation on a P2 level. On the right, on the top right, is the absolute number we need for each staff category to reach gender parity. For example, on the IP grade, we need 1,209 women to reach gender parity. The bottom right is a representation of men and women by entity staff category. So you would see the total counts of staff by staff category for each agency. I would also like to show you another interesting feature on this dashboard on how you can filter data by agency. So a quick example, I can filter here by UNDP, and you can see that the representation of this page has now changed to show you data only for UNDP agency. Like you can see for UNDP, it's almost 50-50 gender parity. Moving on, we are coming to the second page, which shows the representation of women and men by ratio and entity. On the top, you would see the ratio of men and women by each agency. You can scroll from left to right to see each agency representation of men and women. And in the bottom, we have provided charts to show you the representation by various staff categories. You can see the representation by IP, by NO, and by general service. Again, you can filter here by organization. I'll quickly pick, for example, PAHO. So you would see the data representation only for PAHO. Another interesting feature is that if you want to see only the number of men and women, you can click only on one, and then it kind of filters for the rest of the dashboard. Moving on to the next one now. And one of the most interesting page we have on the dashboard is the map on representation of women and men by duty station. Now, as we operate in many locations in one country, so for example, if you see in Afghanistan, we do operate in Kabul, we operate in Kandahar, we operate in Herat. So what we have done on this page is that we have collated all the data by duty station country. So you would see again that if you look at West Asia and Middle East and Africa, you would see the yellow color is bigger than the blue color, which represent with the representation of men. The next one is similar to this, but what we have done here is that we have given you the actual numbers and the ratio of men and women. So here you see the on the left, you get representation of women and men in percentage by duty station. And by scrolling down, you can see all the duty station countries. In the middle is the absolute number of men and women by duty station. And on the right, you see the gender parity index. Again, the blue shows women, yellow shows men. So if you can see from the right side chart for Afghanistan, we need 839 more women to reach parity, while for Switzerland, as you can see, we need 906 more men to reach 50-50 parity. Moving on, we have the next one, which is the representation of women and men by age group. This is the on this page, we have shown a bar graph by age group. On the left, what you see is the absolute numbers, and on the right side, you see the percentages. It's also very interesting data. For example, on the left, you can see right away by the bar length that most of our colleagues fall into their 40s. And among those, when you see on the right side, 56.7% of those are men. Let's move to the next one. This is a page we have developed which shows that we have collected data in 3 different forms for this dashboard. One is the number of men and women by grades, by duty station, and by age group. You can see here the month when these entities entered those data. Star on this chart denotes when the data was entered in which month by the agency. Now let me also touch base the guidance page. You can click the question mark here and it will bring the guidance page, and it shows you how to use the dashboard. You can always come here if you want to know how to use the dashboard. Finally, the last one is your feedback. I come to the end of the demonstration. You can see our contact details here. Now, I would also like to say a special thank you to my former supervisor, Mr. Diego Ruiz, who is now with the International Telecommunication Union, as well as my colleague, Mr. Narendra Joshi from UNDP, who provided help on the technical APIs of this dashboard. Hope this dashboard is helpful for all of you, and thank you very much for your support and attention. Over to you, Katya.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pavardiasit, for your presentation. And thank you also for such a fabulous collaboration between our teams at UN Women and UNDP. It has truly been a great, great pleasure for us. Now let me turn to our distinguished guest speakers. We will start with President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Abdulla Shahid. Let us hear a video message from the President.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the invitation to contribute today. I congratulate UN Women and UNDP on the launch of the United Nations' first Gender Parity Dashboard. Gender equality is a responsibility for all. Yet, the issue continues to be a policy blind spot. With data and information at our fingertips, global issues such as gender equality can be brought further into the spotlight. Data is an evidence-based tool that provides policymakers the ability to gain greater insights into the intricacies of an issue and the capacity to generate momentum for change. It is said that if you are not counted, you are not included. In this context, the United Nations system-wide dashboard on gender parity is indeed a tool for change. And it is a testament to the commitment of the United Nations to advance gender equality and to lead by example. Excellencies, dear friends, while gender equality is the responsibility of all, it is leaders that should make additional efforts to advance and mainstream gender equality everywhere. This means maximizing and utilizing the mandate and authority that one has to ensure that gender equality is mainstreamed in all dialogues, in all policies and agendas, and to ensure that resources are committed to translate policies into action. It is for this reason that throughout my presidency of hope, gender equality will remain at the center of our policies and work. Over the past months, I have met with women leaders, youth, civil society groups, and I will continue to listen and act upon their advice throughout this 76th session. The high-level climate dialogue that will convene shortly after this launch is an opportunity to further listen to women and bring a gender lens into this conversation. Likewise, the PGA Youth Fellowship Program is geared towards empowering youth with a particular focus on young women and girls. Excellencies, dear friends, throughout my discussions, a recurring theme is how to ensure women's active and meaningful participation. The easy answer: to encourage parity in panels, in delegations, and to empower young women and girls across the world. The hard answer, though it need not be, is more political will and commitment. It is my hope that through greater collaboration, continued dialogues, and the advent of data and information, such as the United Nations Gender Parity Dashboard, that greater political will and commitment will follow. Congratulations again on this historic achievement, and my best wishes to a successful launch. I thank you.
Thank you very much. As indicated by the President, we expect the dashboard to serve as a tool for change, and we hope that all UN entities across the board will lead by example and enhance gender parity through this tool. Next, I am delighted to introduce Her Excellency, Ms. Valentine Rugwabiza, Permanent Representative of Rwanda to the United Nations. Ambassador Rugwabiza also serves as the co-chair of the Group of Friends on Gender Parity and is a strong advocate to increase the representation of women permanent representatives. Excellency, could you please inform us about the role of the Group of Friends on Gender Parity in supporting the UN's efforts to achieve parity, and how do you believe this dashboard will be helpful? Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Katja. At the outset, I would like, first of all, allow me to congratulate really wholeheartedly UN Women and UNDP for this very, very important initiative, the launch of the UN system-wide dashboard. It is of particular pleasure to me to have the initiative launched by two close friends of myself and close friends of Rwanda, but also champions of gender parity by Sima, the executive director of UN Women, and Akib Steiner, the administrator of UNDP. Now, this dashboard will really help us monitor gender parity progress across the United Nations. As Sima mentioned earlier, we define ourselves in the Group of Friends of Gender Parity as agent of change. I would also like to seize this opportunity to thank the President of the General Assembly, who joined us, we just listened to his message, for really his leadership, during his campaign and since he has taken his office. As you know, let me say a few things about the Group of Friends. The Group of Friends on Gender Parity was created in 2016, and our main objective is to accelerate the advancement of gender parity and gender equality throughout the United Nations system and ecosystem, I would say, because as member states, we are part of the ecosystem. The group has worked to advance this agenda through various ways, including by underlining women's central roles in the UN, in leading the UN. This is particularly important because most of the time when history books get written, women's role somehow is dropped or gets overshadowed. So we have made sure that the very few women who have managed to break the glass ceilings are really recognized. We organized the first ever UN exhibit that was later transformed into a publication, highlighting both the impact of women at the highest level of the UN and the historic push for gender equality in decision-making. The groundbreaking contributions and achievements made by women leaders in the UN since its founding. Now, when we look at the very few women who have made it, it is an indicator of what we have missed and what could have been achieved, how far the UN would have been if we had managed to include women at all levels. So this is a challenge really to all of us. On your question specifically regarding how the dashboard will be helpful in supporting the efforts of gender parity, we believe that the dashboard should primarily for us serve as an accountability mechanism, especially on the targets of the Secretary General's strategy on gender parity. We know that the goal of 50-50 gender parity among the UN senior leadership and resident coordinators has been achieved. We also know that the percentage of women at the professional level and field service categories has increased to over 41% by the end of 2020. In departments and offices, the ratio is approximately 48% female and 42% male. Yet challenges remain, especially in field missions, in peacekeeping missions as well, where women represent just 30% of all professionals and field services staff. Let us recall that peacekeeping is one of the most important of the UN really instrument, both in peace but also in representation. We all agree that we must make concerted efforts to make gender parity a reality across the entities of the UN, but it is also clear that without a dashboard, a clear mechanism to measure our progress, then the progress will continue to be anecdotal and not attained within the time we want to attain it. Reliable data collection will help us understand what is working and what needs to be adjusted. So let me close here by saying that our commitment is assured in the group of Friends on Gender Parity. And these numbers are critical. We must also uphold the equal and meaningful participation of women to enhance the overall mandate of the UN. I will be interested to also find out a little bit more what is preventing the other bodies that are not among the 40 agencies and entities, what is really preventing them from participating in the dashboard, because this is a contribution we can make as a group of friends, ensure that all UN agencies and bodies contribute to the dashboard. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for your inspiring leadership and strong commitments. And congratulations again for all the valuable work and impact that the group of friends continues to have in enhancing gender parity. Let us then move forward. It is my great pleasure to welcome Deputy Special Representative for Protection and Operations in the United Nations Stabilization Mission in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Mr. Kassim Diane. Mr. Diane, you have had an impressive career in the UN, especially having worked so many years in the field. Therefore, could you kindly elaborate on your work in the mission to achieve parity and why the numbers are so important to follow? Over to you, Mr. Diane. I hope we have him online. We understand that we might have some technical issues related to the connection, so we perhaps move forward and come back to Mr. Diane at a later stage if we can get him back. Let me then introduce Ms. Yasmin Hassan, who is Global Executive Director of Equality Now and has extensive experience in advocating for women's rights. Ms. Hassan, would you please share your view on the importance and utility of data in enhancing gender parity and equality? Over to you, please.
Thank you, Katja. It's my pleasure to be here today with all of you. And I would like to start by extending my heartiest congratulations to the new Executive Director of UN Women, Ms. Sima Bahous. We are greatly looking forward to working with you, so welcome. And I would like to congratulate both UN Women and UNDP for this critical new system that, as we have seen, tells us so much about gender parity in all ranks and locations of the UN. The UN must lead by example, and from the data that we just all saw together right now, the UN is not doing that badly at all, though we are still awaiting a woman at the very top. So I was asked to speak about the importance of data in enhancing gender equality, and I must admit that as a young activist, I did not always support data collection on women's inequality. My experience working in particular on violence against women in Pakistan was that resources to support the work to address these issues were very, very limited, and the need was very immense. So as such, data collection seemed like an unnecessary luxury to me at times, and I couldn't understand why the world would not give credence to what we activists on the front lines were saying about the global pandemic of violence and discrimination against women and the urgent need to address it. But I learned very soon enough that this is not how the world works, that policies need to be underpinned by data, particularly in a world that is patriarchal, sometimes misogynistic, and women were often not to be believed because we were emotional and we tended to exaggerate. So since that time, we gave a lot of effort on data collection, and we've spent a lot of resources in conducting large studies showing the links between equality for women and economic development, peace and security, and even climate change, as well as studies that showed the benefits that institutions and nations reap by having gender parity in the workforce. So let me give you a few examples. McKinsey's Power of Parity report showed that the global economy will increase by a staggering $28 trillion by 2025 if there's gender parity in the workforce. Then researchers like Professor Valerie Hudson, who conducted studies in 120 countries, showed the link between women's equality and the level of peacefulness in society. Then we have the Women, Business and Law Project of the World Bank that has found that equality at the very basic unit of society, which is the family, is critical to achieving gender equality, and has noted a correlation between the number of women parliamentarians and the level of legal equality achieved. And we also have studies that have shown that equality for women is correlated in a variety of ways, including in a variety of ways to curbing climate change, including that more women in parliament translates to stronger climate change policies. So I would say that gender parity not only improves the lives of women, it improves economies, it improves the security of nations, and in fact, it secures the future of this planet. It is a solution to most of the challenges that we face in the world today. So by instituting this system towards more gender parity in the United Nations, the UN is leading by example. But I want to point out that gender parity alone is not enough to end discrimination, including sexual harassment in the workplace. Gender transparency, greater transparency and accountability for violations of the UN's zero tolerance policy on sexual harassment is key to achieving true equality in the workplace. So again, I want to say congratulations to the UN for the progress on gender parity at senior management levels under the leadership of Secretary General Guterres, as well as the previous Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. We at Equality Now will continue to push for the first feminist woman Secretary General to build on this work. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hassan. As you underscored, gender parity not only improves the lives of women, it improves economies, security of nations, and secures the future of the planet. So the impact is immense. Thank you very much again for sharing such a global perspective. Now, let us try again with Mr. Dian, if he might be online. Wonderful. Please go ahead.
Yes, good afternoon, Katja. I really apologize for the technical glitches. And good afternoon, a warm greetings from Goma, Democratic Republic of the Congo. And first of all, let me, on behalf of the Special Representative, Mrs. Bintu Keita, and the entire MONUSCO team, to really thank you and congratulate you for this initiative. And we are really happy to join you this afternoon. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, in my role as Deputy SRSG for Protection and Operations, I witness every day the positive impact gender inclusivity has on the ability of MONUSCO to advance its mandate. Ensuring the equal and meaningful participation of women in the areas of protection of civilians, conflict prevention and early warning, conflict resolution and peace processes, as well as political governance and stabilization efforts, has proven a critical element which defines the success or failure of our efforts. Notwithstanding MONUSCO's leadership's full commitment towards ensuring gender parity at all levels, much remains to be done to reach this goal. Just to provide the historical perspective, in December 2016, 26.3% of MONUSCO's civilian staff were female. This figure has increased to almost 30% by December 2020, 29.8%. And yes, is clearly below the target the mission leadership set for last year when adopting MONUSCO's directives on gender parity in November 2017. I will provide some detail on the stumbling blocks showing our efforts, but will first touch upon some measures which have put the mission on the path towards achieving its gender parity goals. The use of data has been an integral part of these measures, which include setting 6-month and annual gender targets for international civilian staff from the field service to the D2 level. The mission first established a baseline for 2016 and projected an ambitious year-on increase of 4% of female representation. A monthly tracking mechanism of gender parity progress was put in place, informing hiring managers of progress and areas where accelerated movement is necessary. Outreach efforts such as focus group discussions are ongoing to collect data which helps identify the main challenges faced by female staff in the mission. An electronic outreach tool allows informing women in the gender parity talent pool, both within the mission and in UN agencies, of upcoming employment opportunities. Finally, hiring managers are required to provide a justification, in the selection memorandum of why a male candidate is selected over a female one of equal or superior qualification. These selection memoranda are archived and tracked in collaboration between the gender unit and the human resources section of the mission. By setting gender parity targets, the mission monitors progress and creates a measure to identify areas which will require additional efforts. For instance, despite overall improvement, the progress monitoring recently highlighted a drop of female staff at the D1 level, which in turn allowed human resources and the gender unit to alert senior management and advise the hiring managers as well. While data-driven approaches are an important aspect to attain gender parity, there are several challenges in our view that continue to hamper more rapid progress, which I believe must be mentioned here and are beyond the remit of the field missions. Two such challenges, which are time and cost effective for the organization and offer protection for our staff. One, the internal recruitment from rosters comprised of pre-qualified staff, mostly populated by men. And two, the priority given to candidates from downsizing missions represent at the same time an obstacle to the entry of new women candidates into the mission. As a remedy, the MONUSCO Human Resources section is working with the gender section and other thematic sections of the mission on strategies that will extend the outreach and selection processes to diverse pool of qualified women from international NGOs and other identified spheres. Latent but persistent unconscious gender bias can also negatively affect progress towards gender parity. Raising the awareness of hiring managers in new male and female staff members therefore remains an important aspect to foster gender parity. In this context, improved data collection and capacities to monitor gender trends and progress globally will be an important facet to generate accountability throughout the system and to show our commitment toward gender parity. The UN system-wide dashboard, which has just been presented to us, therefore constitutes a powerful tool which will help us leverage data to enhance gender parity within the mission. The gender parity dashboard will also allow for comparative evidence to inform policymaking, programming, and good practices to advance gender parity. I would therefore like to congratulate UN Women and UNDP for launching the Gender Parity Dashboard, which will make notable contributions to our common progress towards achieving gender parity by 2028. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Special Representative Diane, for your valuable insights and all the work in the mission to achieve gender parity. Dear members of the audience, we are slowly approaching the end of our journey today. Last but certainly not least, it is my great pleasure to welcome His Excellency, Mr. Tetsuya Kimura, Ambassador for Economic, Social and United Nations Management Affairs from Permanent Mission of Japan to the United Nations. Ambassador will deliver us now the closing remarks. Over to you, Excellency.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman, Executive Director Bafus, Administrator Steiner, Ambassador Rugwabiza, distinguished colleagues. I would like to thank you all for your insightful briefings and remarks, in particular, brilliant presentation of the dashboard. The launch of the UN system-wide dashboard on gender parity is a pivotal achievement, and it is the beginning of the real UN system-wide initiative to monitor gender parity progress. I would like to express my special appreciation to UNDP and UN Women colleagues for making this remarkable initiative possible. In particular, our delegation appreciates all the work throughout the years that UN Women has invested in monitoring and reporting on the representation of women and men in the UN system. The biennial Secretary General's status report is a good example in this regard. Achieving gender parity is a priority of the UN, but it requires long collective effort. The first step towards achieving this goal is to understand the situation of the staff deployment at every staff grade and in every duty station. Now, in the dashboard format, we can see the beautifully sorted data, but behind the scene, it requires concerted effort of all agencies to collect and regularly update the data, which is not always easy. In light of this, let me respond to and echo the call of action by the Executive Director of UN Women, Madam Sima Bafus. Member states must constantly support and hold UN agency accountable in this shared mission. In the next step of staff recruitment, as the Secretary General's report recommends, member states can support the UN system in strengthening the talent pipeline to encourage more female applicants to apply, especially in traditionally male-dominated sectors. In fact, the majority of Japanese nationals working in the UN system are female, but we will continue our efforts in increasing equal representation across the grades and sectors. The efforts by the UN system have set a great norm and model for achieving gender parity in other entities at regional and national levels. I would like to highlight that the 5th Basic Plan for Gender Equality, which was approved by the government of Japan in December last year, set 5-year and 10-year goals for achieving gender equality. The plan outlines 89 concrete numerical targets for achieving gender equality and increases the representation of women in different sectors at the national, regional, and local levels. One of the targets is in the field of disaster risk reduction. Admittedly, this effort started almost from scratch. In 2004, a total of only 2% of seats on prefectural disaster management councils were occupied by women. In 2020,
Ambassador, we cannot hear you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I repeat, one of the targets is the field of disaster risk reduction. Admittedly, this effort started almost from scratch. In 2004, a total of only 2% of seats on prefectural disaster management councils were occupied by women. In 2020, this ratio had increased to 60%, and the government has set the goal to increase the ratio to 30% by 2025 in its plan. Reaching gender parity requires a long time in any entity, but investment in this effort is a must. I would like to conclude my closing remarks by congratulating the launch of the dashboard once again. As is often said, what gets measured gets managed, and what gets measured gets improved. Therefore, I'm very hopeful that this dashboard will accelerate the UN system-wide efforts and beyond to achieve gender parity. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Kimura, for your kind support and underlining also the role of UN member states in our joint efforts to enhance gender parity and, of course, holding us accountable in the UN system. Excellencies and dear members of the audience, we hope that you have enjoyed the past hour with us, learning from the first UN system-wide gender parity dashboard and the importance of data to enhance, achieve, and maintain parity. As our distinguished speakers have clearly indicated today, gender parity is not an option, it's a necessity. As Executive Director Sima Bahu said, only by working together we can achieve the goals of gender parity and create enabling, equal, and inclusive working environments. Thank you very much again, distinguished speakers, for your remarks and continued support. Dear members of the audience, you are most welcome to visit and explore the dashboard. You can see here the link. Let me also thank and recognize my team at UN Women for all their hard and excellent work to have this dashboard up and running in a great collaboration with UNDP. And let me especially thank our team member, Shinobu Sasaki. Once again, thank you all for joining us today and have a good day and evening. Bye-bye now.